Hi, everyone. I'm so honored actually to have with us Naomi Aldort, who is the author of a book that is near and dear to my heart. It's called Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. I'm so happy and honored to have you with us. You know, I first got your book many years ago. I have a son, 17, and when he was very young, I was in a bookstore looking for parenting books, and I saw the title. And it was the title that just practically had that book jump off of the shelf to me. I love the title, Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. So welcome, welcome. I'm happy to have you.
Thank you for having me,
Yeah,
Suzi.
beautiful.
It's wonderful being here.
Beautiful. Well, I'd love to just jump right in and have you just share with us the heart of the philosophy of your book, Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves.
You know, it's obvious by the title, like you say, that raising our children is about raising ourselves. But I think in the beginning of the book, there is a quote by Khalil Gibran's lover, Mary Haskell. And in a way, it sums up the whole book in terms of the philosophy. And it says, nothing you become will disappoint me. I have no preconceptions that I'd like to see you be or do. I have no desire to foresee you, only to discover you.
Mm.
And in a way, when you ask me, who can sum up their whole philosophy? But I think Mary Haskell summed up my philosophy as good as it gets, but I'll say just a few more words. So it's really about getting our ego out of the way. This child isn't ours. So another quote that I have at the end of the book, I have Khalil Gibran's poem on the children. Your children are not your children. They're sons and daughters of life longing for itself. And that is the bottom line of being curious about who this is. Who is this being that came into my life, and not owning it? You're not the boss. You're not to turn them into something. You respect creation. You nurture, you water the flower so it'll bloom, not if it'll bloom. It's one of the quotes in my book. There's the cat talking. And nurture who the child is not shaping and deciding who they should be, what they should learn, what they will achieve. And you do it through respecting creation and connecting with who the child is, so that the child can dance in the rain, but dance who he or she is, their own dance, not what you think. So there is so much power in that, because it allows us to grow ourselves, and that's the best gift we can give to children. And I work with parents who are mostly attachment parents, who are trying exactly that, who are saying they want to listen to the baby, do what the baby wants, nurse on demand, sleep with the baby, respond to the baby. But it seems like as soon as the baby is a toddler, a lot of the time our egos get in the way and we start getting in conflict because we're wanting something specific, even just wanting the child to be happy. But that gets in the way. And it actually starts even with infants. When we design how and when they should sleep, we get in the way of their wisdom of when to sleep, which is not necessarily when we think they should sleep, although we do need to make the conditions such that they enable the baby's discovery of their need to sleep, and so they can go to sleep. We don't need to control it and decide and put them to sleep. I have 3 sons. I've never put a child to sleep in my life. I've put packages in drawers. I've put dishes in cabinets. I have not put a child to sleep. That's none of my business, the sleep of the child. As a result, my 3 sons are very deep sleepers, never had problems sleeping, and have been very self-directed, because they learn And that's another essence of what I teach. How I feel inside is right. Because what I teach in raising our children, raising ourselves, and through my private sessions on Skype with people and family intensives and workshops, is find out, be curious about the child, find out who they are, what they need. Make sure the message they get from you is, dear child, how you feel inside is right. So when they want to sleep with me, they're not becoming dependent because of wanting to sleep with me. They're becoming independent in following their own decision where they should sleep.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. You're speaking my language. And so that brings me to the question then, how do you work with parents who experience their own anxiety around things with you are talking about,
Yeah.
and their children's anxiety simultaneously? How do you work with each and both of them then?
Well, let me first say that a parent anxiety, when it comes to safety, well-being, health, some of it is unavoidable. Okay, we can be in charge of our own body. It feels pretty good and easy. We know what we feel. All of a sudden, our heart is walking on somebody else's legs, and we have no control, and we don't fully know what's going on there. And the world looks dangerous, the influences, and they're teenagers, the drugs, when they're babies, what's going on inside, are they healthy? So I am not illusioning any parent by saying, oh, you can be a parent completely free of anxiety. That's just not available. But there is another part of anxiety that has to do with what I said about my philosophy, that has to do with being fixated on shaping the child and wanting the child to look a certain way. And the raising ourself part there is to let go of seeking approval. Because it all has to do with fitting in, looking good in the eyes of the relatives, of the partner, of the mother and father, of the society, of what will others say, is my child a good child? And when we seek approval, we're insecure and anxious, guaranteed. So now we're going around, oh, what would mother-in-law say? Should I do this? Should I do that? What would my friends say? Is that the right thing? And we're not actually aware of the child and being present to the child and what's going on for them, because the answer is in the child. The answer is in noticing who this person is, in that curiosity. We're also, as far as the child anxiety, we're training the child to be anxious, starting at babyhood in this society, by training them to want all the time, like be happy all the time, don't cry, here, we'll fix it. Oh, this broke, here, I'll give you another one, I'll fix it. So anxiety on our side is seeking approval. Anxiety on the child side is teaching them to want things and also to seek approval, and also teaching the child that love is conditional. So when we start praising, good job, wonderful, now the child becomes anxious. When I do it again, will I do it as good? That daddy will jump and say, good job again. Will I elicit that same result? I'm supposed to get all this praise, all these kudos. So when the love is conditional, and we may not think that's love, that's just evaluation, but evaluation is for the child connected to being loved, being worthy. And we don't want to evaluate or to praise. So that's one of the things that I teach. And I teach how instead to create connection that encourages rather than an evaluation that discourages or that creates dependency on approval, i.e. anxiety. So we want to not react to how the child is, but discover the child and respond to who she is. The child is right. The child has a valid reason for what they do, and we're looking for what is it and how can I meet the need. And if we're anxious ourselves, it's very, very hard to do. But for the child, it's mostly avoidable. if we work on ourselves. So, for example, actually, just 2 days ago, I had a 10 years old girl in the session with her mother. Usually I counsel on Skype or Zoom the parent from all over the world. But sometimes the parent would bring a child who is old enough, who was willing to talk to me. The child was upset because the day before she and her friend swapped toys. And she ended up with toys she got very excited about. Well, the next day, the mother of the other girl was upset and forced them to swap back. So the girl said this was unfair, and she was stuck in a lot of misery and anxiety about how come I'm not getting what I want. And I use the work similar to the work of Byron Katie.
Yes.
And children do it very, very fast, and this child was no exception. You know, like when I ask her, you know, when you believe the thought that life should be fair, and then specifically we also did when you believe the thought that the toys shouldn't have been swapped back, what do you feel? And it's stress and anger and upset with the mother of the child and all this unfairness. And how would you be without this thought? Because it's only a thought. Without it, we're just in reality, in the present, without all these stories that it's supposed to be this way and this way. And she said, oh, I would be just fine with the swapping back.
Exactly.
So the truth is, it should have been swapped back because that's what it was. It's like the rain, like the wind. We don't say it shouldn't be windy now. I should be able to go to the beach without losing my hat.
Right.
Don't say it shouldn't rain now. I should be able to go without an umbrella or to go at all. We understand it's raining. We accept it. We don't go to war against it. But for some reason, we believe that human behavior is something to go against.
Yes.
That it's not reality. But once we realize it's reality, the other person is the tsunami. It's the wind. It's reality to flow with. That's the next thing that happens. Love that one.
Yes, yeah. And that actually brings me to another question, because you speak a lot about cultivating and acquiring silence and self-discipline and raising really powerful humans. So what you're speaking of in that session is, why could you share with us why you believe that allowing a child to fail and to flounder, as you were saying, is so important to assist them to achieve, such resilience? And how could a parent begin to practice that with their child?
Yeah. So, we have taken to extreme making our children happy. And ultimately, we're teaching them that life has to be wonderful all the time. And a child whose every problem is fixed and life is wonderful all the time, of course, has no muscle for adversity.
Right.
So he can't dance in the rain. He's just running away from the storm all the time. Oh, let's run away. Let's fix. So I'll give you a story, because this is true for teenagers, for babies, for toddlers. So I remember my third child. I'm looking out the window right here, actually. We had a huge porch. Now we have something else, but it doesn't matter. And he was on his tricycle. It was about 1.5 or 2 years old, or, around that. And he fell, and the tricycle fell on him. And initially, he burst out with a scream. Of course, I looked to see that it didn't look like anything serious happened, but I didn't make myself visible. Mm-hmm. I didn't come out and say, "Are you all right?" I didn't give him the idea that something could be wrong. Instead, I observed, okay? And then he looked around to see if anybody reacted, if anybody thought that something bad happened. And when he saw that nobody's excited at all, he pushed the tricycle, he got up, got back on, and walked.
Exactly.
Actually, I remember with another child, the same thing with walking. The first few steps, it takes them a few days to learn to walk. But, when they fall, they kind of look around, and I just smile back. Like, it's all right. There's no failing in life. There is just different things happening. Failing or succeeding is labels that the human mind adds, interpretation, evaluation. But a fallen child is not a failure, is not something bad. It's just what happened next. And a get up and walk again child is that. And a scraped knee is something maybe to put a Band-Aid on. It's not a problem. It's not a disaster. And we need, I remember also in a birthday party once, when a bunch of kids were in those, those wagons, they're usually red, that somebody can pull. And like, I think 5 or 7 kids got on the wagon and 2 kids were pulling them. And they got to this rocky place that goes down the hill, didn't evaluate correctly. The whole thing spilled. All the children went on the floor. None of them were crying, except for one girl whose mother ran over with panic and picked her up. Oh no, oh no. So that child burst out crying.
Yes.
So we did teach them how to react to the storm, how to react to falls, how to react to things happening however they're happening. We teach them to call it a failure or to just say, oh, this one turned out this way. Exactly. And the child may say, well, but I really wanted it to be this way. I say, well, you can try another one.
Exactly.
And to realize that the joy of life is in a process, not in looking for an outcome. Only an outcome can be defined by the human mind as a failure or success. Even the concept outcome is a human mind invention. Yes. There is none. There is no outcome. The tree growing in nature is not an outcome of the seed falling in and becoming a tree.
Yes.
We call it an outcome. It's not right if it becomes a tree and wrong if it got dug by a cat who was, doing his thing there and yes. digging it out. It's just this way or that way.
Yes.
And the other thing that causes, that gets people powerful is not being afraid, and that's the same as the parents, wanting to please all the time. So I teach not to praise and not to foster an attitude of competition. So good job, good boy, good girl, out the window. I definitely teach not to do that. We played games non-competitively, even if the board game was designed competitive.
Yeah.
We found a way to do it non-competitive. The kids didn't know, they'd be competitive. No fixing, no praising, no seeking yourself as a parent the approval of someone else about how your child behaves.
Yes.
Your child goes around and maybe, my oldest child used to go in restaurants from table to table and talk to people. And people say, oh, you let him do that? What if he disturbs them? That's between him and them.
Exactly.
But some people wouldn't dare to tell him. I said, well, that's their problem. They can go to their therapist and learn some assertiveness.
Exactly.
It's not my business. And my child is learning. And he goes, and some tables are enchanted with him and listen for 5 minutes and then tell him, we have a romantic dinner, go somewhere else. Some of them listen for a long time. And some tell him right away, get lost. And some of them, pretend and suffer. Well, that's real life. He's experiencing real life. And those people who tell him, we don't want to listen to you right now, that's real life. I don't need to rescue them from reality, and I don't need to rescue him from reality.
Right.
So I let life unfold, and that's power.
Right.
Because I'm not teaching to seek approval, to want anything. I don't have a problem with tantrums, but I don't cause them. Some people confuse not having tantrums with causing them. Also, I can tell my child, absolutely not, here, give this back to me. And the child bursts out crying. I say, well, could you let him have it? I mean, start with generosity. I'm not saying to go and torment the kids so they can experience failure or experience a tantrum. But if they fell or another child was first on the swing and they're throwing themselves on the ground and say, oh, I just went to the bathroom and now the swing is taken. Well, that's reality. Now the swing is taken. Or the example of children sometimes coming to you and say they won't play with me. They told me to leave the room and not to play. I always teach parents and say to the child, okay, what would you like to do instead? That's making powerful people, because you're teaching them you can handle that they don't play with you. I'm not going back inside and telling them to include everybody and all this beautiful lecture. I'm not fixing your situation. I'm showing you, yeah, I got it. So nobody's playing with you. Would you like me to read you a book?
Yes.
Would you like to help me in the kitchen? I'm making lunch for everybody. And if they already have an emotion because we taught them for everything
Yes.
to go their way, then I validate the feeling. I would say kindly, would you like to tell me more? You really wanted to play with them and they don't want to play with you. Would you like to tell me the whole story? Would you like to tell me how you feel? And I listen, but I don't evaluate, I don't moralize, and I don't take away the sting. It's like, yeah, that can hurt. You really
Yes.
wanted to play with them and you're disappointed.
Yes.
And when they do that, they get over it. And when they get over it, usually you don't even have to say, what would you like to do instead? Because then they say, well, can I do this with you? Or would you call my mother, let's say it's a friend visiting, and have her pick me up because now I'm bored? And say, yeah, absolutely. You
Exactly.
can do that.
Exactly. And I think in where we're finding ourselves in this particular time in history, I think what you're saying, because our children are so looking to us to see how are we responding. So
Yeah.
they're always looking at us. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that it does start with our own parental inner work so that we can become more comfortable allowing life to happen both to us and to our children so they feel that from us.
And that we become worthy of imitating because we are being imitated. And if we are falling apart when we don't get approval, that's going to be imitated.
Exactly correct, which is why I bought your book, because I knew intuitively this young being was going to be looking to me, just to a sentient being, to feel where am I at, not necessarily what I'm saying, but to feel me. And
Yes.
so what you're saying, exactly, to be worthy of being imitated is beautiful.
Yes. And to not drown with the child's emotion,
Right.
but to be the rock that they can lean on and they can
Right.
see themselves in you as I
Right.
can handle life the way it
Right.
goes.
I can handle life the way it goes, therefore you can handle life the way it goes.
Yeah.
And that brings me to another question. I love this part of your work where you talk about, creating your home environment so that your child is not fearing you, but wants to be in cooperation. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate and share a little bit about that.
Well, kind of the whole book is about that.
Yeah.
But let me just remind myself of maybe an example. But it is about leadership. So in the young child, it's about baby proofing, right? It's like so that you don't have to say no. You want to be a leader, but you don't want to be the obstruction of your child's life.
Mm.
So that they see life as going in harmony with who they are, then they want to cooperate, they want to be with you. And you set life up so you don't go to a restaurant when a child needs movement. You don't go and ask the child to be quiet because you want to visit with friends. If you have visitors, make sure your child have visitors too, or a babysitter, or some way to be engaged so they're not your babysitter waiting for you to have fun with your guests. So and question your own trigger thoughts that he should be quiet, he should understand that I want to visit with my friends now, she should listen to me, she should go to bed when I say go to bed. All these thoughts are simply not true because they
Right.
lack the awareness of where is the child and what do they want,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So when we actually are in harmony with reality and we come back to this observing of the child, one of the biggest use of language that is bossy and controlling and creates the illusion of defiance is it's time to.
Mm.
It's a dirty trick that we learned innocently. Nobody should feel guilty about any of this. But when we don't say, we fool ourselves to think, I'm not saying I'm forcing you to go to bed now. I'm not saying I'm not forcing you to leave the playground now. It's time to go. It's time for dinner. It's time for bed. And I always say, who is this God of it's? You know, it's a lousy excuse to blame it's on the fact that we're being bossy.
That's
So,
fabulous.
and the example I always give, like what I recommend to do with children, what I did with my own, when a child, you know, for some reason you want to go home, or maybe the big brother or sister want to go home and one child wants to stay. I remember when I did that, when two of the children wanted to go home from a playground, and the 3 years old was just nuts about sliding on and on and on. And I just said to him, your brothers would like to go home. They want to play Monopoly and they're hungry. How many more times do you need to slide? And he felt ownership. It's like, I'm not telling him, I'm not bossing him around. Okay, time to go, 5 more times. I'm asking him, I'm letting him be in charge of life, have compassion toward others and what they want, counting on him to care that his brothers want to go by saying it and taking it for granted. And then he said 10 more times. And after 5, he was already thinking about what he would do with his brothers and watching them playing Monopoly, got excited and said, okay, I had enough. But the thing is that also along the way, I like to teach parents to be aware of other people. Let's guess what this baby is wanting. Let's guess dad's feeling when he comes home. Do you think he's going to be hungry? Or if somebody is upset, do you know why he's upset? Can we guess? Let's ask him. Why is he behaving this way? You know, being aware of other people rather than all the time about oneself. And you know, the strength is also allowing children to feel cold. You know, it's healthier to be a little cold.
Mm-hmm.
You know, today we're just dressing children because we're cold.
Yeah.
We're not noticing the child. Let them go barefoot in the snow, like Dr. Weston Price discovered healthy children in natural societies do all the time.
Yes.
And some athletes now teach us that that's
Yes.
the way they get themselves healthy.
Exactly.
This Dutch man, Wim Hof, his name, I think.
Yes.
So because now we're talking about how to strengthen the immune system. Well, let it practice. And creating heat in the body is the way it practices. We made ourselves weak, not only emotionally,
Yes.
by teaching a child to want things all the time and to have entertainment all the time and to make every food so yummy instead of just eating food the way it is, making entertainment out of everything. We also teach children to be comfortable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the temperature in the house is between 70 and 71. I mean, like we have no ability like other animals or like we used to have to be able to play in the hot, in the sun when it's hot and in the snow without having to put layers and layers and layers. They can do it. A lot of children go out without a coat and you see the mother running after them and putting a coat on them and they don't even want it. Why ruin their ability to handle the cold? Their little body it's the same mechanism as the immune system is working out. It's getting exercise.
Yes.
I think I diverted from your question.
No, it's perfect. It's leading me to this other, with every explanation you share, it leads me to another part of your work, which kind of goes back to the anxiety question. But I find this with the parents I work with is often there just seems to be such a struggle. And I think you're speaking to it about really it starts with the parental anxiety when we have things around bedtime and dinner time and brushing your teeth. And how do you work with the parents part of the anxiety when a parent is so most parents are either inundated or convinced that it needs to be a certain way, so it just creates so much anxiety.
Right. So I work with parents every day on Skype, and what I do with them is a process of inquiring into their thoughts. It's similar to the work of Byron Katie, although it's my own brand of it to some degree because it's specifically on parenting, but it's in essence the same. Looking at what causes anxiety. My child should be able to do that. A lot of the trend right now that gives parents anxiety is achievement. Every parent want their child to be the next doctor or pianist or sportsman, like look on YouTube videos and you'll see anxiety. I mean, it's like all these super kids doing super things. And I go like, oh my God, who is behind this kid and what kind of anxiety behind it. So I like to stress, and it comes back to what we spoke about originally, to be observing the child and responding to who they are without an agenda, without pushing them to succeed and to achieve through praise and prizes or any of that stuff. But with the parent themselves, when they're anxious, I definitely have them write down their anxious thoughts. Yes. I'm worried that the child would be this and that. He would never be able to listen. He would never learn to read. He would never stop hitting his brother or sister. Nobody would like him. Whatever the thought is, they write it down, and I go through the whole process with them. First of all, is that true? And can you really know that it would never go away, or that whatever they have in mind, he's a bad kid, he's hitting his brother for a good reason. And when you realize he should hit his brother, which doesn't mean you let him do that,
right?
But it means that the drive to want to do that, it comes from a real and valid reason, then you put yourself on the correct path. You were on the wrong path of just obstructing the child, yes, creating struggle and anxiety, and you can still stop them from hitting, but with no anger, with total compassion. And now you're wondering, so when you write down the thought, he shouldn't be hitting his brother, you go like, okay, so he does have a valid reason to hit his brother. And I would ask the parent when I work with them, so give me 3 good reasons why he has a good reason to do it. Yes. Jealousy, he took his toys away, he always plays with the friends that come to visit him, he takes his attention away from mommy and daddy, whatever it is, there's always a huge list, right? So now you realize all of that, you have compassion, you have understanding, and because you know what the problem is, you can do something about it.
Yes.
Maybe he shouldn't spend as much time together. Maybe we need to hire a babysitter for the brother and go on an outing, both parents and this child, so he feels he has 2 parents again once in a while. Maybe this, maybe that. Maybe we should lock his toys and his creations so his brother doesn't get to it and ruins everything he does. So when you start looking at that the child is right, when you turn the thought that thinks something is wrong with the child backward, you realize what is the valid reason for the child, and you realize that your own thinking was misleading you.
Exactly.
So that's kind of in a short way. I do a lot more. I also provide parents with healing games that I invent, kind of custom made. They tell me what's going on, and I would invent some family games or something a parent can do with the child, with dolls or with a ball or with nothing, just with themselves, playing specific games that are healing, that bring the problem out and give the child a practice of getting out of a pattern that isn't working for them and that hurting them inside. And that's often healing for the parent just as much.
Well, exactly correct, right? Because yes, when we're one person can't heal basically without both people healing. So, yes, and I think it's so beautiful, your work, because children learn through play and yes, we heal through play, so it's lovely. And I will certainly be sharing where everybody can find you, because I think in our culture, we are so disconnected from our own ability to be healers, and to have your guidance and do it through a method of play and through a way that a child can embrace it is invaluable, you know?
And it's a family games. A lot of them are
Yeah,
group games, can do with other people. I teach them in workshops and in private sessions. I just make them up for the
yeah,
parent child.
yeah.
Or people come here for family intensive, like they come to
Mhm.
my home. I have an apartment in the yard. It's very
Mhm.
beautiful here for a few days.
Mhm.
And we invent games on the spot that
Phenomenal.
really punch the anxiety, the dependency on approval, anger, upset, jealousy, all these things can get healed by exposing them and playing with them and training oneself through play
Mhm.
to have other muscles.
Exactly. And I think, parents are just needing this permission to not go with the mainstream. I know I had that. My son was in a Waldorf school when he was little, and people consistently were like, "What do you mean you haven't taught him to read yet? What's going to happen to him?" And there is a lot of fear that we are inundated with. So to have people and teachers and guides that we are aligned with
Yeah.
that can assist us to feel empowered from the inside out,
Yes.
and to know, of course, our own deepest intuition, if we get still enough, knows that a child is curious. That's the characteristic of childhood, is they're curious. Of course they're going to learn to read. If so
You can't stop them.
you can't even stop them. Exactly.
Not
So
only that, it's much easier to learn to read than to learn to talk, and that they figure out at age 2 or so,
exactly,
between 2 and
exactly.
5. But I find that it's very advantageous to learn to read as late as possible
Yeah.
because while not reading, and this is my own thinking, and just an opinion and observation, while not reading, the child develops phenomenal memory
Yes.
and
Yeah.
phenomenal imagination.
Yes. Yes.
That's why you read them books and they know them by heart.
Exactly
And
correct.
they're not dependent on the visuals, so other senses stay just as sharp. And children have all kinds of senses. We're not quite sure what they are. They
Yes.
seem to be connected in ways that we lose as we get older. And the later we get them into this
Yes.
conceptual tool of
Yes.
reading, I think the better. I mean, my children didn't go to school and taught themselves to read, each in their own method.
Yes.
And they invented the method, which is more important than the reading itself.
Yes. Yes.
Not only they felt empowered, but the brain learned to figure out, what are the symbols meaning, and to invent a way to figure it out
Yes.
and to master it, which is a lot better than
Yes.
having some method that teaches it to you on a certain age. And of course, they learned in a time that was fitting their eye development,
Yes.
perceptual development, concepts of right and left development. There's so many things, then people label them dyslexic. They're not dyslexic.
Yeah.
They're normal. Every child doesn't see a
Yeah.
difference between something facing this way and this way. Mommy facing left or right is still mommy. A dog facing left or right is still a dog. A chair facing this way or that way is still a chair. Why would a symbol of a certain shape become something else when it faces the other way? It makes no sense. So for a child to come to a place understanding symbols and drawing, the brain of each child gets there in a different time.
It's just
And
so.
it has to coordinate with everything else. And if we force it at a
Yeah.
time that it doesn't have it, then we say, oh, the child is dyslexic. They don't see, they don't understand, they confuse the sides. No, they don't confuse the sides. They don't go through the wall when they see a door here. they, they
Exactly.
see where the tail of the dog is and where the head is. They don't think the face is here,
Exactly.
when it is here. So it's just that they don't have that particular frontal lobe development. And
Yeah. Yeah.
when you wait until, and the child himself knows best when he got all the ducks in a row, and then they figure out reading often overnight.
Yeah, that was exactly my son. You're reminding me. My son used to play animal school, and it was before he was even in school. But he lined up all his stuffed animals, and before he learned to read, he created his own language,
Yes.
And you're just reminding me of it. It was very, very intricate with these different symbols. And
Yes.
he would draw the different symbols and he would tell me exactly. So he created it and then he somehow in his own way morphed into these symbols, you know. But
Yes.
he had a whole language that was his and he completely understood this language, you
Yes.
know. It was,
Exactly.
and I haven't thought about that in so many years.
Yeah, and they invent math and they invent
Exactly.
ways to solve problems and numbers.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
they understand it so much better. You know, one of my sons at age 7 or so, he loved numbers and he would add giant numbers like millions, but he would add them from left to right. He wrote them one under the other
Hmm.
and added the digits from left to right. And I didn't know how he could do it because what about the extras, right? And in school, you just learn automatically to do it from right to left, to take the
Right,
extras and move them around. And you
right,
never fully understand it until maybe you're an adult, and a lot of adults don't understand it.
right.
So I didn't correct him. I just asked him to explain to me how come he got it right. What did he do with the extras?
Yeah,
And he gave me a whole lecture, which he understood it better than me
that's phenomenal
because he just
because it came from the inside out of him.
yeah, he
Yeah,
found a way. He said, I know there's this extras, but at about this and this I can see. And he had some method to figure it out because he never made a mistake.
that's phenomenal. That's exquisite. Well, I could stay here and talk to you all day. I would just end with just I'm so grateful. I just end with this one question that you're pretty much leading into, which is I know in your philosophy you really believe that innately within each child they're capable of their own autonomy, of their own happiness. You know, so just to maybe share in closing with everyone, elaborating on that would be a great place to complete.
When you look at a toddler, they're happy to be here. They're enlightened, but they're not because they're not conscious of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Um, so they're happy to be here, and we do a great job sometimes of killing that happiness. So most of my answer is what not to do. So
Yes.
if we stop teaching them that joy means you have to want something and get something and jingle something in front of your face or make the food a certain way or get gifts and material goods, or that the circumstances outside of you cause your happiness. Oh, you're going to get that, you're going to be so happy. Or you model that, or you teach them to seek approval. Let's see if grandma likes what you're doing. Sing her that song. Wow, wonderful. Now you're teaching them to get away from this unconditional, innate happiness. You teach them to
Mhm.
want things, to depend on getting something all the time, being
Mhm.
entertained all the time, seeking approval and seeking stimulation and gratification and comfort. So when they express their exuberance, which often parents stop that exuberance, the child jumps up and down and jumps on the couch. Don't go on the couch. Don't touch this. Don't touch this. So that
Mhm.
ties together to the other question you ask of making the circumstances that
Mhm.
allows them freedom. I'm not saying to let them dance on the table or on grandma's uh, couch. I think children who are generally free are totally responsive and cooperative with boundaries. And
Yeah.
I found that in my children and in a lot of children who raise their children this way are actually the best behaving children. So when people say, oh, then the children will go and do all these things, no, they don't. Because when they experience you on their side, opening the doors for them, but also leading with clarity, we're going to a concert, we have to sit silently here. So if you need something, you give me a sign language. And I did that with my children who went to classical music concerts from age 3. Say, we go to a concert that you're familiar with, we sit on the aisle. When you just can't stand it anymore, you peed before you ate, everything perfect. You want to leave, you give me a signal. As soon as clapping hands, we sneak out. You know what your power is, you know the rule of the game. So actually, and I got compliments for my children every single time going to restaurants. It's like a joke. It's like, okay, somebody's going to come to the table and say, Oh my goodness, your children behave so well. What do you do? I say, it's what I don't do. I'm not telling them how to behave. I just made sure they played in the playground for 3 hours before coming here, and that we came to a restaurant that has a playground to play while the food is being prepared, and that they want to be here and they're hungry and they chose food and it's healthy food, whatever, whatever. So the situations are flowing with the river, not being their oppressor and not teaching them that they must have what they want all the time on the one hand, and yet flowing with life as much as possible. Letting them fall off the tricycle, not praising them, not manipulating them, letting them have autonomy, but also teaching them to be considerate of others by leading the way. No, we can't go to grandma now, she's asleep. Or we need to be quiet. My children would play for hours and let me take a nap, from a certain age on. But whoever was the youngest, by age 2, they could sit next to me on the floor with some pieces of apple and some blocks and puzzles, and I could give a session or do an interview like this. And they wouldn't pip unless they have to go to the bathroom, in which case I would interrupt and help them. But they would sit for a full hour, never interrupting. Yes. They understood that the other person exists, which sometimes, and that's a whole other subject for another interview, how we make our children have power over us instead of over themselves. Yes. So I'm talking about autonomy, not about power over people, because with true leadership, your children learn how life is conducted and they behave well because they want to, of their own free will, because they have a partner, you. Yes. You're not the oppressor. You're going with them on the path. This is what we do here in order to flow.
Yes, because there's something innately that feels so good about being part of something, know. And so when the parent is in the flow, and I think that's what it is for the parent to find the flow. And when they find this
child,
through all of the different things that you said, for instance, going out to eat, making sure that your child has played for 3 hours in the park or played before they come. They're hungry. You're going to a place that they're going to, all of those things, but when you create that flow.
Yes, but Suzi, let me just point out, because I don't want parents to listen to it and start feeling guilty.
Right.
To be able to do that, like I can hear the voices, but I can't do that. I go unconscious. I don't notice. I get angry. That's all part of work on yourself. That's why I give sessions. That's why there are books and seminars and web classes that I do, or I come and do workshops in different communities or via the internet, as long as we have viruses around that we're freaking out about. And to work on yourself, to work on what it is that's being triggered. Right. What it is emotionally that gets in your way inside of you, in your way of being present, and notice, the child needs to play a couple of hours before they're seated. They need to sit in a restaurant they're excited about, and that they need to be hungry and want to be there. So that we go as a family to the restaurant, we're all excited. We decided like equal people. Like, yes, we want to go here. This is wonderful. We're all wonderful. It's not that I'm dragging my kids into my life. It's like we have a life together. And parents sometimes need their life and hire a babysitter. Or like I said, I can give a session. I have my life. And I would say to my kids, you can play in the other room, or you can be with your dad, or you can be right here silently. And they do either one of those with total understanding, because life wasn't focused on them, which is another subject sometimes to cover. From babyhood on, I think parents today are focused on the child too much, especially in those early years. So the child is used to so much, adoration and stimulation, and everything is about her.
Yeah.
And we actually want to raise children who are born into a community that flows and that they're just joining the river.
Yes.
They are not the center.
Yes, they're joining the
They are
river.
joining a community. They notice what other people do, what other people do with other people. That's part of why they behave well, because it's not about them getting whatever they want.
Right.
It's them observing, how is this river flowing? I need to go around this stone in order to stay together with everybody.
Yes.
So
Well, I
the
love that
importance
you.
of community. So people, like with the first child, I always tell them, make sure to be around other people,
Mhm.
family, friends, relatives, with other children, with other adults, and just make sure the child is not the focus in their experience,
Mhm.
like all about them and them getting what they want and life being this perfect happy-go-lucky.
Yes. And I think what you're saying, it is such an enormous amount of work. It was for me to find my flow. And I would love for you to share with everyone where they can find you, because I'm sure there are going to be many people who would like to be able to work with you one on one or do one of your family retreat
Yeah, and
intensive.
that's the best. Those who come to family intensive, they transform their lives.
Mm,
They come for a few days here, and I hear for years, I just get emails from them or a
mm,
session every now and then, like, they really get their life out of it. But you can achieve a lot just by private sessions
mm.
like this. People talk to me on Skype, and they can reach me at my website, naomialdort.com. Also authenticparent.com, not authentic parenting, that's something else, not even similar, but authenticparent.com, authenticchild.com, all will get you to the same place. And there are videos there are articles, and there is Call Naomi, a link that shows how to call me. There is Family Retreat, which shows you how to create for yourself a private workshop for your family or extended family. I'm very flexible. Sometimes people like to bring grandparents or whatever with.
Mm.
And there are grandparents who come sometimes to big workshops. And I public speak, so that's available too. People can organize for their community, either long distance, on screen, or in person, depending if the finances allow that, if it's not so far. But I go to Europe and Australia, and I go places. But recently, I'm trying to not pollute with flights, and I'm also
Mhm.
getting older.
Mhm.
So there are web classes coming up in Spain, which would be translated in
Mm.
English, and Switzerland and Slovakia. So those will be both online, and people will be in a group, but other people will be able to join in. I mean, depending on these rules with the virus
Exactly.
ruling us.
Exactly. Well, either way, you can be online and we can find you
Yes,
online. And
yes,
I will obviously have all of your information. So don't worry if you didn't hear it. Everything will be printed right below this so everyone can find you really, really easily.
right.
But you are a wealth, just a wealth of not only information and wisdom, but really that richness that you can just feel the possibility of a deeper connection with, parent child. And that's what we're all looking for. So thank you so very, very much. I'm very grateful and appreciative of your time.
Thank you, Susie. I
All right.
appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. So until next time.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.